Who breaks the power of sin and darkness, whose love is mighty and so much stronger, the King of glory, the King above all kings, who shakes the whole earth with holy thunder and leaves us breathless in awe and wonder, the King of glory, the King above all kings. This is amazing grace. This is unfailing love, that you would take my place, that you would bear my cross. You laid down your life, that I would be set free. Jesus, I sing for all that you've done for me. Our chaos back into order, who makes the orphan a son and daughter, the King of glory, the King of glory, who rules the nations with truth and justice, shines like the sun in all of its brilliance, the King of glory, King above all kings. This is amazing grace. This is unfailing love, that you would take my place, that you would bear my cross. You would lay down your life, that I would be set free. Jesus, I sing for all that you've done for me. Worthy is the Lamb who was slain. Worthy is the King who conquered the grave. Worthy is the Lamb who was slain. Worthy is the King who conquered the grave. Worthy is the Lamb who was slain. Worthy is the King who conquered the grave. Worthy is the Lamb who was slain. Worthy, worthy, worthy. This is amazing grace. This is unfailing love, that you would take my place, that you would bear my cross. You would lay down your life, that I would be set free. Jesus, I sing for all that you've done for me.
You hold me by my right hand, and you guide me with your counsel. And afterwards, you will take me into glory. Whom have I in heaven but you? And earth has nothing I desire besides you. My flesh and my heart may fail, but God is the strength of my heart and my portion forever.
mountains that I face, stronger than the power of the grave, constant in the trial and the change. One thing remains, one thing remains. Your love never fails, it never gives up, it never runs out on me. Your love never fails, it never gives up, it never runs out on me. Your love never fails, it never gives up, it never runs out on me. Your love. And on and on and on and on it goes. Yeah, it overwhelms and satisfies my soul. And I never ever have to be afraid. One thing remains, one thing remains. Your love never fails, it never gives up, it never runs out on me. Your love never fails, it never gives up, it never runs out on me. Your love never fails, it never gives up, it never runs out on me. Your love. In death, in life, I'm confident and covered by the power of your great love. My debt is paid, there's nothing that can separate my heart from your great love. Your love never fails, it never gives up, it never runs out on me. Your love never fails, it never gives up, it never runs out on me. Your love never fails, it never gives up, it never runs out on me. Your forgiven because you were forsaken. I'm accepted, you were condemned. I'm alive and well, your spirit is within me because you died and rose again. Amazing love, how can it be that you, my King, would die for me? Amazing love, I know it's true, and it's my joy to honor you in all I do. I'll honor I'm forgiven because you were forsaken. I'm accepted, you were condemned. I'm alive and well, your spirit is within me because you died and rose again. Amazing love. Amazing love, how can it be that you, my King, would die for me? Amazing love, I know it's true. It's my joy to honor you. Let's sing Amazing Love. Amazing love, how can it be that you, my King, would die for me? Amazing love, I know it's true. It's my joy to honor you in all I do. I honor you. You are my King. You are my King. Jesus, you are my King. Jesus, you are my King. You are my King. You are my King. Jesus, you are my King. Jesus, you are my King. Amazing love, how can that you, my King, would die for me? Amazing love, I know it's true. It's my joy to honor you in all I do. I honor you. Lord, I come, I confess, bowing here, I find my rest. Without you, I fall apart. You're the one that guides my heart. Lord, I need you. Oh, I need you. Every hour I need you. My one defense, my righteousness. Oh God, how I need you. Sin runs deep, your grace is more. Where grace is found is where you are. And where you are, Lord, to rise to you. When temptation comes my way, when I cannot stand, I'll fall on you. Jesus, you're my hope and stay. When I cannot stand, I'll fall on you. Jesus, you're my hope and stay. Lord, I need you. Oh, I need you. Every hour I need you. My one defense, my righteousness. Oh God, how I need you. Sing that one more time. Lord, I need you. Oh, I need you. Every hour I need you. My one defense, my righteousness. Oh God, how I need you.
I hope you had a good Christmas season. My parents came back from Florida to enjoy Christmas with us and got to fully enjoy a Grand Prairie Christmas at minus 40. And they're just looking forward to going back to the warmer weather. So in talking about New Year's, hard to avoid talking about New Year's without referencing New Year's resolutions. And I'm going to talk more about that in the devotional videos that we're going to be putting out in a little over a week's time, January 10th. And so you'll see more of that. But I want to just tease one little aspect, one helpful hint in making New Year's resolutions. And you can put this into play right now. Don't. But seriously, if you do, if you're crazy like I am and you just feel like you've got to try to do something, whether it's eat less or whatever you want to try to do, here's one little helpful hint. And I've got a few of them in these videos. One helpful hint is to tell somebody what you're planning on doing. It helps. Tell somebody. And so when I was making the videos, I had told Clint one of the things that I really disliked when I was making the videos was how dependent I have become on my notes. And so, pastoring for 20 years and always coming with a manuscript, whether it's a devotional or sermon or whatever it is, I rely on my notes. And so my New Year's resolution this year, and you'll all get to know, I'm telling you all now, I'm telling a lot of people, I'm trying to do that less. And so this morning is step one of that. I did not come with a full manuscript. I only came with jot notes. And so this could be a complete train wreck of a message this morning, as I panic and don't know what I'm talking about. One of the things that I love doing about when I'm preaching a New Year's message is try to set the tone for the coming year. And I feel like there's a high calling and a high weight on that. And as I've been scrolling through Instagram, Twitter, and whatever, and some of the profound statements that some of these guys that I follow have put out there already, and I'm like, man, that's what I want to do. I want to give some good, profound message for people. Whether that's no matter what this new year is going to bring with it, whether hardship or blessings, or no matter what it brings, Jesus is the same. And there was a guy who had that written, and he just eloquently how he had put that out there. I'm like, that's what I want to do. That's what I want to do this morning. But God would not let me do that. I kept getting dragged back into this Bible story that he wants me to share, and I'm thinking, I don't know what this has to do with New Year's. And I don't know what we're supposed to take from this because I'm still wrestling with the message itself. And then, you take a week off for Christmas and you're just enjoying the Christmas break. And so these thoughts are just rattling around in my brain, and I don't want to have to do this story, but I can't get released from this story. So in all honesty, I come with very few notes because this is almost like we're going to look at this together and see what God is going to speak to us. Because as I was preparing this message, I've been talking to a few people. I've been listening to this podcast. Maybe you've heard of it, The Rise and Fall of Mars Hill. Maybe you've listened to it. If not, it is profoundly disturbing because it's talking about the brokenness that resides in our churches and in the leadership of our churches. And the calling of us as pastors, the people who are most attracted to the pulpit, and I kind of mentioned this the last time I spoke, and it's disturbed me because I wonder, is this me? The people that are most attracted to pulpits are narcissists. I mean, who else would dare to get out week after week and speak on God's behalf if there's not something inherently wrong with you? And yet people get attracted to the leadership and to the person and the voice. And so a part of this journey for me this week has been God saying, I want you to kind of just stumble into this because you've become so accustomed to a well-turned phrase and all these kind of things. And in my heart, I wonder, is it more about me or is it about him? And so when we're all said and done this, my greatest hope is that if anything else I say and anything else you may hear, if there's something that's going to draw you closer to the reality of who God is and who it is that we're following as followers of Jesus, that's my desire. I mean, that's to say that in 2022 that I've grown deeper in being with him, then nothing else really matters. If we can go through this year and say I've grown deeper in being with him, then it doesn't matter what else we're going to face this year. That's the thing. And so we want to challenge you to be intentional in being with him and being like him this year. And so with that in mind, we're going to turn to Acts chapter 12. Acts chapter 12. And we're going to look at this story that's portrayed here. Acts 12. So, well, let's just start. Verse 1. I'm reading from the New Living Translation. I normally go NIV, but really shaking it up this year. It was about this time that King Herod arrested some who belonged to the church, intending to persecute them. He had James, the brother of John, put to death with the sword. Now, a little bit of background. Herod Agrippa is the Herod that they're talking about. He's the grandson of the Herod who was killing the babies when Jesus was born. Same lineage, same family line. This is the grandson. And he is trying to curry favor with the Jewish people because he's reigning over that area of the world. Jesus had been crucified 12 years earlier. The church had been growing for about 12 years at this point. And we see the first disciple is martyred. Now, he's not the first martyr. There have been people who had been already killed. But this is the first of the 12 disciples that Jesus had. So Judas had committed suicide when he was ridden with guilt over what he had done in betraying Jesus. But now James, the brother of John, you remember, Peter, James, and John. This is the James. He is put to death by Herod. First disciple to be martyred. And this is what it says in verse 3. When he saw that this met with approval among the Jews, when Herod saw that this had met with approval among the Jews, he proceeded to seize Peter also. This happened during the festival of unleavened bread, the Passover festival. After arresting him, he put him in prison, handing him over to be guarded by 4 squads of 4 soldiers each. Herod intended to bring him out for the public trial after the Passover. And the whole idea was he was going to bring him out after Passover, basically to find him guilty and to put him to death. That was the idea. Persecution had broken out in full force. Persecution broke out against the church early on with Paul, formerly Saul, but then he was converted. Jesus confronted him, changed his life, and he's actually doing missions work now. And 8 years of peace had come upon the church until this moment. And what's interesting is, so he arrests Peter, and it says that he put 16 guards on him, which is basically 4 guards doing rotational shifts that would typically have been like 6-hour shifts. 4 guards for 6 hours, boom, switching them out daily. Constant watch. Why? Because if you remember earlier on, back in Acts chapter 4 or 5, Peter and John and some of the other disciples were imprisoned, and they were miraculously set free. And so Herod is making sure that this does not happen to Peter again. I've got him, I'm going to keep him. And what we actually see, and we'll see in a moment, he was physically chained to 2 of the 4 guards. Physically chained. There's no way this guy is getting away from me, is what Herod's saying. What we see in this story, there's something in here about hardship that God wants to speak to us. You see, God doesn't avoid hardship. He doesn't keep us from hardship. And in the person of Jesus, he didn't avoid hardship either. The Advent messages that we were speaking all leading up to this were pointing to that very thing, that Jesus humbled himself, gave up the very nature of God, equality with God, considered it something not to be grasped, and humbled himself and became a man. Knowing the road that he was going to walk, that he was despised and rejected, is what it says. A man of sorrows. And so God himself doesn't avoid hardship, and we don't get to either. We don't get to either. And so whatever 22 is going to bring for us, I'm calling it 22, by the way. I'm dropping the 20. It's time. It's time to just do it. It's 22. Whatever 22 is going to bring for us, it could be good, it could be bad. I really don't know. But we should never, as followers of Jesus, think that because we are followers of Jesus, we're going to get it easier. And yet, a large portion of the church actually believes that. I've read the books, I've heard the messages. And there is nothing in here to lead me to believe that that is the truth. Why? Because James was killed with a sword. And Peter's imprisoned with 4 sets of 4 guards put on him to watch him. So verse 5, so Peter was kept in prison, but the church was earnestly praying to God for him. What do you do when you don't know what else to do? You know, as the church, we pray. And this idea of prayer has fallen on tough times of recent. You know, when we hear of somebody going through hardship or trial, our initial reaction is to say, we're praying for you. And that's almost becoming mocked in our world today. But let me ask you, what other recourse do we have? Someone's lost a loved one. Yeah, you can sit with them and you can You can be a listening ear and a shoulder to cry on, and all those things are good, but ultimately the thing that we can offer that the rest of the world doesn't have is we have communion with the Father. And we're saying we're going to go to the Father on your behalf, and we're going to talk to him. We're going to see if there's something he can do, and we're going to petition him on your behalf. And this idea that prayer is this silly last resort, I can't quite get there. Because to me, prayer is essential. And in fact, in Jesus' ministry, Jesus makes very intentional effort to take time out of his ministry to pray. When his disciples think he should be out preaching, Jesus escapes to pray. Because he saw that it was vital to what the Father was asking him to do. And I honestly don't think that we can do any less or any more in that regard than to take time to talk to the Father, to see what it is he has to say. Prayer is essential. It's essential to the process that God is doing in our lives. Verse 6, so the church is praying, Peter's imprisoned. The night before Herod was to bring him to trial, Peter was sleeping between two soldiers bound with two chains, and sentries stood guard at the entrance. So these two guys he's chained to, and then two other guys that are basically standing guard at the entrance. Suddenly, an angel of the Lord appeared, and a light shone in the cell. He struck Peter on the side and woke him up. "Quick, get up," he said. And the chains fell off Peter's wrists. I mean, this is interesting. Peter knows he's about to go on trial the next day and probably going to be put to death, and somehow he's asleep. I don't know how he slept. He's chained to these guys. He knows he's going to trial, probably going to be killed, and he's asleep. Asleep sound enough that an angel shows up and has to kind of like, wake up. Then the angel said to him, "Put on your clothes and sandals." Peter did so, because he would have been stripped down to his underwear, maybe even completely naked. Peter did so. "Wrap your cloak around you and follow me," the angel told him. Peter followed him out of the prison, but he had no idea what the angel was doing was really happening. He thought he was seeing a vision. They passed the first and second guards and came to the iron gate leading to the city. It opened for them by itself, and they went through it. I mean, this would have been a locked gate, and it just opened up by itself. And they went through it. When they had walked the length of one street, suddenly the angel left him. Then Peter came to himself and said, "Now I know without a doubt that the Lord has sent his angel and rescued me from Herod's clutches and from everything the Jewish people were hoping would happen." This story is so crazy. 10 years earlier, Peter had been miraculously freed from prison, so he knows it's something that could happen. It happened to him before. God is able to miraculously, instantly, completely change a situation. Peter understands that. He grasps that. He fully understands that, but yet he didn't expect it to happen. He thought he was having a vision. He didn't believe what he was seeing, he was actually seeing. He thought he was having a dream. He thought he was still asleep. And yet the angel of the Lord, step by step, leads him out of captivity, wakes him up. The chains fall off him. Get up, put on your clothes, put on your shoes, wrap your coat around you. He's walking him through what he needs to do step by step. Leads him right past the guards who were standing guard, that somehow they didn't even see this happen, to the locked gate of the prison that just opens before them, and out he goes into the street. And I'm reading this and I'm thinking, this is amazing. There's two things that I see here that just blows me away. Number one is just the simple step-by-step detail that this angel has to give Peter. I mean, it's almost like getting your kids ready in the morning. Get up, put your clothes on, put your shoes on, put your coat on, and follow me out here. And this is what he does. And so as I'm reading this, I'm getting to think, because Peter didn't even know it was really happening. He thought it was all a dream. He thought, he was in this stupor. He was having a sound sleep. And he's completely just amazed at what's happening. And yet, our God is a God who's willing to show up and guide us step by step, even to the simple things of put your clothes on and put your shoes on. Because I don't want you walking around the city naked and without your shoes. And I'm thinking, I don't know that I've ever looked at God quite through that lens. That he doesn't want Peter to walk through the streets naked. And so he has to tell him step by step what to do. And yet he's willing to do that. And then the second thing is that when God brings freedom, he doesn't just bring a semblance of freedom where Peter escapes by the skin of his teeth, naked and barefoot running through the streets of the city. He walks out fully clothed as if nothing had even happened. Not even realizing fully what was happening. And I'm amazed at this story, and yet I'm troubled by it because God did that for Peter, but what about James? He was killed with a sword. Could God not have delivered James in the same way he delivered Peter? And that disturbs me. And it disturbs me heading into this year. Because here's the truth of the matter. God is not subject to our expectations, nor do our expectations always reflect his purpose or even our best interest. Let me say that again, and I even put it on the screen because this is one you want to make a note of. God is not subject to our expectations, nor do our expectations always reflect his purpose or even our best interest. And as you think back over this past year, how did God show up for you in 2021? What are the things God did in your life this past year? And maybe you say, that's a hard question to answer because I don't even know if he showed up. I feel like he was absent. I feel like I was left to die by the sword. And maybe you were. And maybe you feel you've got reason to be angry with God because of that. But he's God. And some of us will die by the sword, and some of us will be miraculously freed from prison. And I don't know who's who. That's uncomfortable. And I hope you feel that discomfort with that, because I seriously do as I read that story. Verse 12. When it dawned on him that I'm actually freed from prison, he went to the house of Mary, the mother of John, also called Mark, the guy who wrote the Gospel of Mark. So he went to his mom's house, where many people had gathered and were praying. So this is where the church was gathered, praying for Peter to be released. Peter knocked at the outer entrance, and a servant named Rhoda came to answer the door. When she recognized Peter's voice, she was so overjoyed, she ran back without opening it and exclaimed, "Peter's at the door." This is the stuff that makes me know that the Bible is real. Because why would you include details like that? She was just so beside herself that she didn't even bother to open the door, left Peter out in the street knocking. You're out of your mind, they told her. The people who were praying for Peter to be released from prison, when she kept insisting that it was so, they said it must be his angel. So they had this kind of mythology or this belief in the Jewish people that every person had their guardian angel, and the guardian angel could sometimes appear and have a resemblance of that person. But Peter kept on knocking. And when they opened the door and saw him, they were astonished. I can't believe you're freed from prison, even though we're just praying for you to be freed from prison. Peter motioned with his hand for them to be quiet and described how the Lord had brought him out of prison. Tell James and the other brothers. So this is James, the brother of Jesus, the guy who wrote the letter of James in the New Testament. Tell James, the brother of Jesus, tell James and the other brothers and sisters about this, he said, and then he left for another place. The reaction of the church to Peter being released from prison is gold. They were shocked that what they were praying for had actually happened instantly and immediately and in a miraculous way. They were shocked that their prayer was answered and answered so quickly. Which leaves me another question about something that we often believe as the church. What does this say about faith? Because I grew up in a church where if you didn't pray with the right amount of faith, then you couldn't expect anything to happen. Let me ask you, did they actually expect it was going to happen? No, they didn't expect it was going to happen. They're shocked when it actually happened, and yet they're praying for it to happen. And God doesn't sit there and say, well, I'm not answering that prayer because they don't have enough faith, because they're going to be shocked when Peter shows up at the doorstep. Which then leads another question. Is God dependent on me? Does he need me to do this? If I don't pray with the right amount of faith, then God is not able to do something. Is that really what we believe? Because let's face it, church, we are not always really aware of what's happening right in front of us. And I know that because I'm not aware of what's happening in front of me. And I'm part of the church. And as already stated, God is not subject to our expectations. He's not subject to act at our expectations. He's not subject to act above our expectations or below our expectations. God is going to do what God is going to do. And yet he calls us to pray. He calls us to be a part of that process. And sometimes we're shocked because as we're part of that process, something happens. And sometimes we're shocked because we're part of that process and nothing happens. And it's all the beauty of his miraculous grace. Because anything that happens is an act of God's grace. Anytime he shows up, in any way, shape, or form, it's an act of his grace because he does not have to. He chooses to be involved with our lives. And he tells us to pray. And so we do. And I've said to people have asked me, they come for prayer after a service for healing and for these different things. And I've been asked, have you seen people healed? Never. I personally have never prayed for somebody and they were healed. I had somebody pray for me and I was healed. But I've never prayed for somebody and seen them healed. But I will continue to pray Sunday after Sunday if you come for prayer. And I'll be shocked when the healing happens. But I trust that it can happen. It's like Nicky Gumbel says in Alpha. He was quoting John Wimber. And John Wimber led this phenomenal healing ministry in the 80s, and they saw miracles and crazy stuff happen through the Vineyard Church movement. And John Wimber would say, when we didn't pray, we didn't see much of anything happen. When we prayed, we saw some things happen. And so we'll continue to pray. And I think that's my challenge for you heading into this year. We have no idea what God is going to do. We really don't know what He is going to do, but we are seeking whatever it is that He wants to do. And as we pray, that's aligning ourselves with the heart and mind of God. C.S. Lewis says he didn't pray to change God. He prayed, and as he prayed, he saw himself being changed. Verse 18, in the morning there was no small commotion among the soldiers as to what had become of Peter. No small commotion, you think? He's chained to these two guards. There's two guards put at the door, a locked cell. Somehow he leaves and the guards don't know what happened. After Herod had a thorough search made for him and did not find him, he cross-examined the guards and then ordered they be executed. You see, Herod thought he was something. Herod thought he really was something, and this is why he put James to the death. This is why he had captured Peter, and we'll see later that his pride and his arrogance actually leads him to be struck down miraculously by God instantly. He thought he was something big. He thought he was a big deal, and he was going to show the people how big a deal he was by putting Peter to death, and yet what we see is that God is bigger. And what we see in this story is that God is bigger than our problems. God is bigger than any Herod or ruler that may come our way who is doing his own thing, whether that's a boss, whether that's just a person in your life, whatever it may be that you're going to face. God is bigger than all those things. Even the people who think they're bigger than God, God is bigger than them. And the other thing we see with Herod is that God is bigger than our own pride as well, because we read next, and I'm not going to get into that, but he's struck dead because of his pride. But my question in this, what about James? What about the poor guards? They're just doing their job. Did their lives matter? I mean, when God chooses to free Peter, he knows how Herod is going to respond to this. And he knows that these guards are forfeit because Herod is not going to believe anything they're going to say that Peter was miraculously rescued by God. He's going to immediately think that these guards had something to do with it because that's the only logical explanation in his mind. So what about the guards? What about Peter himself? You see, Peter's freed from prison in this situation, and we only see Peter one more time in the rest of the book of Acts because he goes into hiding, because he's a wanted man. And so he has to go into hiding, and we see one more time Peter shows up in the council in Acts chapter 15, the council in Jerusalem, where they say that the Gentiles can be welcomed into the church without becoming first converts to Judaism. And then we don't see anything more about Peter other than the fact that he is later martyred himself. So why go through all this trouble to free Peter at this time if Peter's only going to be martyred later? I don't know. And as I read these stories and wrestled with this, I have come to the place where I can readily admit that I do not understand as much about God as I think I understand about God. I do not understand his plans or his purposes as much as I like to think I understand his plans and purposes. I have no idea what this year is going to bring for me or for you or for anybody. I really don't know. The only thing I do know is that once in a while, God shows up for his reasons, for his purposes, and sometimes we get to benefit from that. And the only thing I do know is that God sent his Son to show us that this life, 22, 21, 23, however many years we may have, it's only a small part of the bigger picture. And so what if James died by the sword? And so what if Peter ends up being martyred anyway? And so what if our lives end this year? Because eternity is greater. And what Jesus has given us is greater than any of those things. And if you have today and you're breathing today, God is calling you to follow him today. Because you don't know what tomorrow is going to bring. In fact, Jesus himself says, don't worry about tomorrow, because you don't know what tomorrow is going to bring you. You only know today. And so in looking at 22, people have already made or are beginning to make resolutions. We make resolutions maybe about eating less, sleeping more, sleeping less, sleeping on a more regular schedule, praying more, reading the Bible more, giving more, maybe in our attitudes being more encouraging, trying to be more a person of joy or a person of peace. Whatever that may look like for you, whatever you've been thinking about, let me encourage you with this. 92% of all New Year's resolutions will fail. %80 will be broken by February. But what if? What if God is not put off by your failed resolutions? What if you say, I want to be with you more this year, I want to be more like you, and you fail at that? And what if God is not devastated by your failure? What if God actually uses that failure to come alongside you and to teach you something more about who he is? What if this year continues the old cycles of perform, fail, try harder, perform, fail, try harder, and God shows up in the midst of that and says, you know what? That's not really what I want for you. This idea of becoming disillusioned and pushing back and everything that we do in our Christian journey, trying to do what we think God wants us to do when what God really wants us to do is to just be present and let me be present with you. In your brokenness, in your failure, in your uncertainty, in your struggle in reading through Acts 12 and saying, God, what does that even mean? Who are you? Why do you do things the way you do? I don't understand who you are anymore. And honestly, if you were to leave today, and that is the thing that you hear is like, that guy doesn't know anything about God. He's preaching foolishness. I've been accused of that before. It's fine. Because if you leave just wrestling with that thought and are angry with me, then I've done my job. I've done my job. Be angry with me all you want. Dig in with who God is. Who is this God who allows James to be put to the sword, who frees Peter miraculously from prison and then allows these guards to be executed. Who is this God who does these things and calls us to follow him? Because I definitely have been stirred up to find out more of who he is. Because this God is intriguing to me. This God is uncontrollable. He's not a tame lion. He's king. And I want to follow him. And I'd love it if you would follow along with me this year in digging in as to who he is and what he's calling us to. That's my challenge for you heading into 2022. Let's stand together. Jesus, I endeavor to be honest with your word, with what you're speaking to me, and how to communicate that to the best of my ability to the people who listen. And I know in myself there's brokenness at work. That I don't always do it just purely for you. That I do get something out of it. And I admit that freely. But I know that you take the broken and imperfect things and you desire to shape us more and more into the image of your Son, Jesus, who said, I don't do anything or say anything except what I hear the Father say or what I see the Father do. Lord, that's my goal. That's my aim to get to that place, but I feel sometimes I'm so far from it, and I know that as I pray this morning with my brothers and sisters, we feel the same way. So many times we feel so far from the mark. We miss it so often. My prayer, Lord, is that I would be more like the astonished and shocked church, that at least their intentions were heading in the right direction, even if their faith wasn't there with them, than to be in the seat of Herod, so full of himself, so full of pride and arrogance that he could not even see you or the possibility of you being at work. And so, God, my prayer for this church, for CFA, for everybody who will hear this message, for every believer who says they desire to follow Jesus, that this year will be a year of new understanding and revelation of who you are, that it may crumble some of our old beliefs, that it may crush our spirits in certain ways so that new growth can take place, that new life can spring up from the old things that we were holding on to that are not really you at all. Jesus, my desire, my prayer is that you will guide us and lead us this year. I know you will because you say you desire to do that. Help us to be sensitive to your voice as you call us to yourself. Help us to dig deep into your word and to wrestle with who you are, not just to accept the simple ideas and the caricature of you, God, but to struggle with the living God, the God who is reigning and ruling and alive at this very moment, to understand who you are. Lord, if there are people who hear this message who are not following you right now, that this would be a call for them to examine who you are, to examine where they are in relation to you, to hear your Spirit drawing them back to yourself, and that they would say yes to your Spirit as you say, come to me, all you who are thirsty, all you who are weary, all you who are hungry, and I will fulfill all of your needs and desires. And yes, you may die by the sword. You may be the next person to go. But this life is not all there is. But there's more. And that I want to show you the fullness of what that is. Lord, that we would hear your Spirit calling us to that. In Jesus' name we pray it. Amen. Amen. Happy New Year to you. As you go, struggle and wrestle with the God that we serve.